American Family Association is now available in a special limited edition DVD set. This release includes a Sunday school curriculum and 2 hours of additional footage. Go to thegodwhospeaks.org to get your copy today. thegodwhospeaks.org. Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
And good Thursday morning, everyone. Fred Jackson in for Jenna today. She's got a few extra days of vacation. Be back in the chair early next week. Wanted to wish you a happy New Year, but we all know by now the celebrations of New Year greatly marred by what happened early yesterday morning in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. Hundreds, maybe even thousands of people out there in the streets celebrating the New Year, when we had a terrorist attack. 3 hours into the new year, and we have a terrorist attack. Here's what we know, in case you've been tuned out at news over the last several days because of the Christmas and New Year's vacation. I don't blame you. I'm not condemning. Even news guys like me try to turn it off every now and then. So I want to go through what we know as of this morning. As of this morning, the death toll has now climbed to 15. And at least a dozen others still in hospital. Some reports say 10 of those just clinging to life. So at least 15 killed. And basically, this is what we know at this hour. They've identified the driver of this pickup truck, a rented pickup truck. He drives along Bourbon Street. They didn't have the usual barriers up, and he drove around a police car, slamming into all of these people who were out on the streets celebrating. The FBI has identified this driver as Shamsud Din Jamar, 42, a U.S. citizen born in the United States. He's from Texas. But also, we do know he was a terrorist. He had an ISIS flag on this rented vehicle. He had other explosives in the vehicle. It was his intent to do great damage, and he certainly did. He emerged from that truck. He was shooting at police. 2 police officers were injured, but those police officers did take him down. The suspect is dead. As I say, the investigators found multiple improvised explosives, including 2 pipe bombs that were concealed within coolers and wired for remote detonation. That, according to Louisiana State Police Intelligence Bulletin, which was released through the AP. The bulletin that was released also says surveillance shows 3 men and a woman placing one of the devices, but federal officials did not immediately confirm that detail. Now, what does that mean? That means there perhaps were others involved with this. Driver of the truck and these others. We understand some were arrested, but some of those were also released. So that's what we know about what's been going on. So lots of questions this morning. A little bit more on Shamsud Din Jamar. He was in the military for about 10 years. He was in Afghanistan for about a year. We are told he was in the Human Resources Division, and he was also on the IT side. So that raises the question. He certainly wasn't involved with explosives when he was in the military. So where did he learn about these things? Heard an interesting interview this morning with Joey Jones on Fox. Joey Jones is a retired Marine explosive expert, and he talks about those explosives and those bombs that this suspect had. Cut number 4.
If we're taking at face value the terms that have been used, they say something like a pipe bomb. They also said that they were wired for remote detonation. The thing that people need to understand that pipe bombs they're specific, but they're very easy. So you're taking black powder or smokeless powder. It's what people use to reload bullets. It's what's used in fireworks. It's incredibly easy to get a hold of. And you're putting it in a hardened container because you need containment for it to go to deflagration, which is similar to detonation, and sometimes detonation. Usually they're using some sort of fuse. Think like you light a firework, you set it down, that burns, then it blows up. For him to make it remotely detonated, that means it has to be detonated electronically. And that takes a special part of a bomb to do that. And it's not easy to get a hold of. It's very difficult to make. And things like dry air this time of year make it very difficult to insert that into an IED and safely for the bomb maker employ it. So all that's to say is we're getting this information. The likelihood of how accurate it is, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, some interesting comments there from Joey Jones. It certainly leads us to believe, based on what we know so far, is that he came out of the military, this suspect, Shamsud Din Jamar, came out of the military and must have learned these explosive techniques after he got out of the military. Joey Jones also had some more comments on the suspect and how complex the ambush was. Again, obviously trained, obviously probably radicalized somewhere along the way after he got out of the military. Cut number 5.
We don't know who this guy is or who he talked to. If he was HR and IT in the Army, he didn't learn anything about making bombs or tactics when it comes to what he did. This is what I said yesterday hosting Friends. This is what's called a complex ambush. So first he created chaos and mass casualty with the vehicle. That gets everyone not knowing which way to go, fog of war.
Right.
Then he jumps out and starts shooting. That's immediate action, or that's your second action. And then he had a contingency with these bombs if he succumbed to his enemy. And that's your third wave. So that's a complex ambush. That's tactics. Now, whether he figured it out or was told, this is what I want people to understand. When we talk about radical Islamic terrorists, which is a term we haven't used much lately, all the way back to Al-Qaeda and Taliban, these aren't just a bunch of cave-dwelling goat herders that picked up some Russian's AK and wanted to wage a war. When we were fighting in Iraq, we were fighting jihadists from all over the developed world, engineers, chemists, tacticians from countries all over the world who wanted to go to Iraq or connect with those in Iraq and create tactics and opportunity for them. That's how they learned to make these IEDs. So the reason why I say that is if this person was connected either a one-way or a telephone, either he's reading what they're putting out there or they're telling him what to do. If he was connected to ISIS or any of these groups, the opportunity for him to learn how to do this from them is pretty high. And it's not like bomb making is some well-kept secret. It's not a secret at all.
All right, that's Joey Jones, a retired Marine explosive expert. You probably have seen him on Fox. What's more frightening about this also is the fact that the Sugar Bowl game between Georgia and Notre Dame was due to be played yesterday. So you not only had people in town in New Orleans who were there for celebrating the new year, but also countless other people who had arrived for the Sugar Bowl. Now, we know that that game was canceled last night, but they are due to play that game today. That has raised a level of concern with the Attorney General of Louisiana, Liz Muriel. She says, if there are other bad characters out there, then there could still be a dangerous situation. Cut number 1.
Well, obviously, our first priority today is the safety of everybody in New Orleans while we kind of carry out and go through with this game. I did express some concern about that. I think that, yesterday there were discussions about whether to have the game last night, which I frankly thought was absurd. We still had bodies that had to be removed from the ground and an open investigation to secure the crime scene. And so, it seemed to me that was not a hard decision to make, even if the logistics of it might have been more complicated.
Liz Muriel, the Attorney General of Louisiana. Now, she says maybe it would be a good idea to postpone this game even further because of so many people in town and the concerns there may be others out there with a similar intent of this truck driver. Cut number 2.
Well, they didn't ask my opinion about whether it should or it shouldn't, although I do have one. I think that, we certainly want to reassure people that we feel like they are safe in New Orleans. I think this is a very serious event. I would like to talk to the FBI this morning and to reach out. My priority this morning is to reach out to the Department of Justice and the FBI and make sure that they are giving top priority to this investigation. The special agent in charge in New Orleans is out of the country. That's the individual who has the most experience and knowledge about the city and experience with public officials in the city and in the state. So I want to make sure that they're taking this seriously and that they have put all of their best resources toward this investigation and that they are tracking these people down.
Now, added to all of this, you may have heard the report yesterday of the exploding Tesla truck there in Las Vegas. Well, now we know this morning there are some similarities. We now know, and authorities suspect, that that was also a terrorist attack. Very interesting about this is that the truck that was rented by the terrorists there in New Orleans was the driver of the Tesla in Las Vegas also rented from the same group, Turo, T-U-R-O. It's an app that you can rent. So there is a connection between the two. But here's a Fox News report on that Las Vegas Cybertruck explosion. Cut 3.
Police say they have identified the person they believe was driving that Tesla Cybertruck. It is believed the driver was a Colorado Springs native with military experience. The person was killed in the explosion. 7 others were hurt. Authorities say they found gas and camp fuel canisters, as well as large firework mortars in that truck. They were able to trace the vehicle back to Colorado using video footage captured at Tesla charging stations. And investigators are trying to determine if there is a link to the attack in New Orleans. Watch.
Do I think it's a coincidence? I don't know. But what I can tell you is we're absolutely investigating any connectivity to what happened in New Orleans, as well as other attacks that have been occurring around the world. We're not ruling anything out yet.
And as we mentioned earlier, the vehicles used in both incidents were rented from the same rideshare company, Turo. In a statement, a spokesperson said, "We are heartbroken by the violence perpetrated in New Orleans and Las Vegas, and our prayers are with the victims and families. We are actively partnering with law enforcement authorities as they investigate both incidents." The Cybertruck investigation did involve input from Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who posted updates on X, including this. Quote, "The evil knuckleheads picked the wrong vehicle for a terrorist attack. Cybertruck actually contained the explosion and directed the blast upwards." Also noting that even the glass doors of the lobby of that Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas weren't even broken, guys.
Now, there is no indication that these suspects, no indication at this point that these suspects crossed the border over the last 4 years. As we mentioned, certainly in the New Orleans case, he is a longtime U.S. resident born here. But Tom Homan, who is the border czar coming in under the new Trump administration, notes that during the Trump administration, first administration, there were only 11 people detected from the terrorist watch list. During Biden, 388, a 3,427% increase. Now, he says the potential for these kinds of acts, because of how Biden treated that border, has increased. Cut number 6.
Well, we got President Trump coming in office in a couple of weeks. Who's going to secure the border? President Trump created the most secure border of my lifetime. I worked for 6 different presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan. No one had the success President Trump did. Illegal immigration is at a 45-year low. Illegal immigration down 83 to 90%, depending on what time frame. Joe Biden's the first president in history of this nation who came in office and unsecured the border on purpose. Not mismanagement, not incompetence. They knew exactly what they were doing when they unsecured the border. And you're right, we got over 3,000% increase in people arrested on terrorist watch lists coming across the border. But the most scary thing, the most vital thing, we got over 2 million known gotaways. Border Patrol's arrested people from 180 different countries in the last 4 years. Some of these countries are sponsors of terror. We arrested over 300. How many of that 2 million came from the country sponsoring terror? If people think it's nothing, then you're just missing the law of average. I think terrorists have crossed this border and under Biden. I don't know how many, but someday we're going to find out. It's going to be a bad day for America.
Another thing, investigators have noted that both of these terrorist attacks using rented vehicles. A lot of people referring back to an incident in New York in October of 2017. There, a guy who rented a truck rammed into a bunch of people on bicycles, killing 8 people and injuring 11 others. So what is the connection between all of these? There are similarities in the modus operandi being used. Explosions in vehicles. We hope that the FBI is well engaged in this. Liz Merrill, the Attorney General of Louisiana, pointed out that the guy in charge of the FBI office is out of town at the moment. She's also expressed some concern about cooperation so far from the FBI. We're back in a few moments.
This is Bible League International with an urgent plea. You know, Christian persecution in the 20th and 21st centuries exceeds all previous 19. I mean, that tells you that we're addressing what is arguably the number one issue facing the global church. Christians are paying a heavy price simply for believing Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. This woman in South Africa was hated by her family now that she's come to Christ, but here's her reaction when she finally got her own Bible.
We were in Mpumalanga. The lady there, she knelt down and she cried. At the age of 60, she never had a Bible.
AFR listeners, you're putting tears of joy on the faces of Bible-less persecuted believers all over the world. You've done that for thousands. We have to wrap up January 31st. The need is so great. So please, at $5 a Bible, $50 sends 10, $500 sends 100. Would you pray about it and then call 800-YES-WORD, 800-YES-WORD, or give it sendbiblesnow.org, sendbiblesnow.org. Would you do it by January 31st? And God bless you for caring.
The words you are about to hear are taken from letters sent in by members of the Trinity Debt Management Program.
Dear Trinity, today I'm making my final credit card payment.
Before I came to you, I was in a constant state of anxiety and panic, but now there is hope for my family's financial future.
Working with Trinity made me understand that I'm not alone.
You really do help people.
Your kindness will never be forgotten.
Without Trinity support, I would not have achieved my lifelong goal of becoming debt-free.
We saved a lot on interest and penalties, of course, but the reward was the gift of human kindness.
Trinity has carried me through a very difficult time in my life. You're amazing.
I used to feel so anxious and hopeless. Now I feel grace and peace.
God bless Trinity as you continue to help others become debt-free.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813. That's 1-800-788-1813.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. A Texas school district felt the wrath of every church-going citizen in the Panhandle after they compared the Bible to pornography and banned God's Word from school libraries. Canyon Independent School District told parents in an email that they ordered librarians to remove the good book in compliance with the new state law. That law aimed at removing sexually explicit material from school libraries. Parents and preachers showed up at the school board meeting not too happy. State Rep. Jared Patterson, a Republican, co-authored the bill, and he fired off a letter saying their decision was illegal. The letter left the superintendent sweating like a sinner in church. And after that Come to Jesus board meeting, they reinstated the Bible. Needless to say, banning the Bible in Texas was one of the biggest boneheaded decisions they've made. It ranks right up there with letting men become Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders or saying brisket really isn't barbecue. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
And indeed, welcome back to this Thursday edition of the very first live edition in this new year, 2025. As I mentioned, I'm Fred Jackson filling in for Jenna. Jenna will be back in the chair next week, taking an extended visit time with her folks. Well-deserved. But hey, along with what's going on these terrorist attacks, one now in Las Vegas, obviously the one in New Orleans, we'll be keeping you up to date on this. More information is coming out almost hour by hour. So stay tuned to our programming today. Today's issues will be on. We'll have an update on then and certainly during our newscasts throughout the day. But there's some political drama going on too, and that involves House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's facing a possible attempt by some within his own party to oust him. They're not happy with the continuing resolution that was allowed to pass there just before Christmas. And so the Republican Party, someone said they have a tremendous ability to shoot themselves in the foot. But Mike Johnson interviewed this morning on Fox, says he's received the endorsement now of President-elect Trump, and he's hoping for a positive vote to keep him in that job tomorrow when they vote on that on the Hill. Cut number 7.
We're going to get this done. Look, I'm humbled and honored to have President Trump's endorsement for the role again, as well as the endorsement of leaders across the conservative spectrum and the Republican Party, all of my colleagues that are standing with us, and we will get this done. Look, the things that we're talking about this morning are an illustration that we live in very serious times. We cannot afford any palace drama here. We have got to get the Congress started, which begins tomorrow, and we have to get immediately to work. We have to certify the election of President Donald J. Trump on January 6th, on Monday. And we have many important things pressing on us right now. So there's no time to waste. We have to stay unified. The American people gave us a mandate. You know, President Trump got 77 million votes. We got almost 75 million for House Republicans, the largest number ever. And they have sent us a message that they want us to begin fixing all of this, and we will, and we're excited to do that.
Speaker. All right, that was Mike Johnson. That big vote tomorrow, as he said, the certification of the election is supposed to happen in the House on Monday, January 6th. But also, there's important business to do before the inauguration on the 20th, and that is we have to start these Senate hearings on these appointments that President-elect Trump has made. Among them, his selection for ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas. And we had a chance to talk with Mike Huckabee back a few weeks ago on Today's Issues about his appointment. And the initial question that came from Tim was, how did you find out that Donald Trump wanted you to be the ambassador to Israel? Let's have a listen.
Well, it's a pretty interesting story because I had not lobbied for the job, had not talked to Donald Trump about it, and really was sort of just minding my own business, taking care of all the stuff that was on my plate, which is quite a few things, from a daily TV show on TBN, a weekly TV show that I do from Nashville on TBN, speeches all over the place, several businesses, board memberships of corporate boards I'm on. I had a lot of stuff going on, and I'm sitting at my desk, and all of a sudden my phone rings. I normally don't answer the phone if it's a number I don't recognize or that's not in my directory. I just don't. And I figure if it's important, they'll leave a message. But something said to me, take this call. I thought, well, I don't recognize this number, but okay. That voice said, take the call. I did. It was Donald Trump on the line. He said, I want you to be ambassador to Israel. And honestly, I was pretty well floored. I knew that there had been some people who had suggested to him, and others had told me, boy, I hope you become ambassador. And I had said, I would be thrilled if David Friedman goes back because he's wonderful and a dear friend. And, I later found out that he really wanted to do something different this time. So he had taken himself out of it, but it just was not something that was on my plate. So, there was nothing that President Trump would have asked me to do that I would have been excited about. I wasn't interested in babysitting a bureaucracy or oiling the machinery of some government agency. But he offered and asked me to do the one thing that I felt like in so many ways, Tim, God had prepared me from my teenage years. And so I just felt like Isaiah and said, here am I, Lord, send me. Amen. And so that's how it came about. It's truly, and I say this with a great sense of awe and wonder, it is a God thing. There's no other explanation for how this came about.
Amen. Governor Huckabee, Fred Jackson here. Along with being a former governor, you're a preacher. And so this got to make it extra special for you. You're going to be moving to Jerusalem. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been going to Israel since 1973. My first trip was in July of that year. I was 17, a month away from my 18th birthday. Something was just so powerful when I first went there. I went on a trip with a young man who was going to be my college roommate. We went all over the Middle East. We went to Lebanon, Jordan, Syria. We went to Greece and places I wouldn't even go now. But when we went to Israel, of all the places that we went, there was something about it, and I felt at home in a place I'd never been. I can't describe it. It was a spiritual thing. It wasn't a geographical or any other kind of aesthetic connection, but a spiritual connection. And so I just fell in love with Israel. And since 1981, I've taken groups of people over the course of the years. I've probably been 100 times. I've taken tens of thousands of people on tours to Israel and have developed very close relationships, not only with just ordinary people, but also with Benjamin Netanyahu, who I've known for 30 years and campaigned with over in Israel with him, Speaker of the Knesset, many members of the Knesset, many ministers in the government, business leaders there. So the connections have run deep. And it really is something that makes a lot of sense for me. And I have such a deep conviction about Israel's right to exist in the homeland that God gave them. I think it's a critical moment in human history. And there is something that is going on in our world that only can be described as a spiritual battle between good and evil. And that's when I try to figure out, why is there such rampant anti-Semitism? Where does this come from? Why do people hate the Jews? We see it on prestigious college campuses, even here in America, and in the streets of major cities. What is it that causes people to have this visceral hatred? And quite frankly, there's only one explanation, and that is that this is a rebellion and a spiritual anger against God himself. Because if you hate God, you hate the people that he has chosen, you hate the land that he has set aside, because what you ultimately hate is you hate the creator of the universe and his law and his rules and his kingdom. That's the only thing that makes any sense in the explanation of why people are filled with this rage against Jewish people.
Talking to Governor Mike Huckabee, Mike is going to be the new ambassador to Israel for the Trump administration. And you're listening to American Family Radio. I'm Tim Wildman with Ed Vitagliano and Fred Jackson. Mike, let me ask you this. When will do you know yet the transition, when that will take place, when you will, what has to be done for you to be, in your office in Jerusalem?
Well, the biggest hurdle is clearing Senate confirmation. And so far, I don't have a schedule of when that will all happen. I'm not sure anybody does. The new Senate won't swear in until January the 5th. And I'm not sure that they can take any big action until the nominations are official after President Trump is sworn in on the 20th of January. But somewhere in that time frame, the Senate might decide to begin conducting subcommittee hearings even before the inauguration and before the nominations are official. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But somewhere after that, then I'll go through the process of Senate confirmation, and if confirmed, and I pray I will be, then there would be a process of being prepared and getting ready to make the move to Israel and serve as ambassador there. And again, the time frame, I have no idea. I wish I did.
Yeah. When would you? Will you? Do you know yet? Like, will you be over in Israel like two weeks out of the month, or a month, and then back home for a month, or how's that work?
Well, you're pretty much posted there full time.
Okay.
How often I would come back to the States would probably be determined in large measure by, did I need to come back to Washington for meetings?
Gotcha.
Either with the State Department or the White House. But it's a permanent posting. And one of the questions that my wife and I have not got an answer to, how often are you able to come back? I mean, obviously you'll come back some, but it's pretty much the full-time responsibility for the ambassador to be on site.
Right. One other question I had relative to the job there, and by the way, we're talking to Mike Huckabee. He will be the ambassador to Israel. Who's the ambassador now? Do you know?
Yes, it's Jack Lew. He was former Treasury Secretary under President Obama and served as Chief of Staff for a time in the Obama administration. He and I had a wonderful phone call the other day. He was very gracious and reached out to me for us to chat, and we did. And I expect there to be a very smooth transition. But he was incredibly gracious, and we just talked mostly practical things. We didn't try to get into a lot of policy issues because there might be some differences of opinion. But I think, he has served honorably, and I'm looking forward to making the move. David Friedman, who was ambassador under President Trump before, is a close friend, and he and I have had several conversations, and of course we'll have several more. But, I'm grateful that everyone with whom I've spoken that has something to do with this really does want this to be a smooth, orderly transition, in part because Israel is at war for its very existence. And everyone understands that it is a very critical time. We need an ambassador on the ground as soon as possible. So I expect that as ambassadors go, this particular position will be one of the first ones that will go through the Senate.
Absolutely. I have another question about that. Mike, like you, I haven't traveled to Israel as many times as you have, but I'm getting close to 30, I think, tour groups that I've led with my wife and formerly with my dad and my sons and so forth. We've been over there 30 times. And so, I've become really good friends with a lot of Arabs, and I'm sure you have too, who live in Israel. Yes. And so this isn't when you support Israel, it doesn't mean you have animus toward Arabs, and some people want to break it down like that.
And some of whom are Christian.
That is not true. Yes, some of the ones that I work with in Israel are Arab Christians. Now they're in a minority, they're because most Arabs are Muslims and most and they're a minority in the country. But still, what I'm saying is, you will be working with Jews, but you'll also be working with Arabs too, right?
Well, without a doubt. And there's been a lot of, I think, misunderstanding in that when the Arab Christians, and there are quite a few, but not as many as there once were, they once dominated cities like Nazareth and Bethlehem. Back when I first started going to Israel, 80% of the population of Bethlehem, for example, were Arab Christian. And now it's 80% Muslim. It's changed. And when the Muslims came in and took over, they really pushed out many of the vendors and shopkeepers and others who had made Bethlehem a wonderful community. And the Palestinian Authority, in their taking over sort of the jurisdiction of some of these areas, it's made it very difficult for people to go and have the same kind of security that they once had. But people don't understand, there are actually Arabs that are in the Israeli Knesset and members of the Druze faith.
And in the military.
The Israeli Knesset. Yeah, in the military. They serve in the military. Yeah. So it's not that you have to say one or the other. The one sticky wicket does become governance. Is there any real future for what has been heralded over both Democrat and Republican administrations for a so-called two-state solution? And what that would have to involve is that you would have basically two governing authorities and in many ways trying to oversee the same piece of real estate. That's not practical. I don't think that's going to happen. And President Trump has not pushed for that. He's the first president in a long time that has not. So what you may end up with is a situation where if the Israelis do control their property, as they have, they certainly have respect for. They include, you'll see many medical doctors, attorneys, and others who are Arab, but they live very freely in Israel. And they come and they go, and they don't have any restrictions, and they can do anything they want. The difference is there's a very distinct the line between people who are Arab, whether they're Muslim or Christian Arab, and the people who have really gravitated toward the Palestinian idea that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. That's where it becomes problematic.
Right.
And if you have people who believe that Israel should be erased and annihilated, as the slogan goes, from the river to the sea, you cannot have people who have that view governing the land that people are trying to coexist in.
There you have it. President-elect Donald Trump has chosen Mike Huckabee to be his ambassador to Israel. It's going to be a breath of fresh air, folks, from the Biden administration and their half-hearted support for Israel. Much more ahead here on Jenna Ellis in the morning. Don't go away.
Let's think about what God has done. I would wager that his top news story is still that the free salvation through the blood of Jesus Christ is available to all. I wager that will be the top news story until that salvation is no longer available. You will have made your decision for eternity. He doesn't ask us to do anything he won't, and then he does above what we can possibly do.
Hear Todd Herman on A Disciple's View, weekdays 12 p.m. Central on AFR. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins.
You look at 3 of the 4 justices there in Colorado that voted to remove him from the ballot. They all came from Ivy League schools, schools that had been created as divinity schools. What a picture of the apostasy in America when it comes to the church.
Stay informed with Tony Perkins and his guests on Washington Watch, weekdays at 4 p.m. Central on AFR, or catch up anytime with the podcast at afr.net.
Just as it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news of good things. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. A friend of mine who pastors a church in Nigeria once said to me, "You know, America has sent more missionaries into the world than any other nation before it. But the nation that once sent missionaries has now become the mission field." As you consider the calling God has for you, I just want to remind you that just as other nations need missionaries, we need missionaries in America, too. There are a lot of neighborhoods right here in our country that desperately need evangelism and discipleship. Let's not forget about them.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
You know, a lot of times you have to choose between something high quality or something that saves you money. But if you could get both, why not? Especially when it comes to healthcare, and that is MediShare. You get both. Many families save $500 a month with MediShare, and that's huge. But it's also true that people wind up way more satisfied, too. The member satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. That's because MediShare works. It has for more than 30 years. It's a community of Christians who have shared more than $5 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth. They love the huge PPO network. So, yeah, really, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price in 2 minutes. Here's the number. Just call 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
And indeed, welcome back. Fred Jackson sitting in for Jenna today. And just to repeat some highlights from our top story, the investigation continues into that Islamic terrorist attack in New Orleans early on New Year's Day morning. According to various news agencies right now, the death toll has now climbed to 15 in that attack, and several others, we understand, are still in critical condition. Here's, basically what we know. A man by the name of Shamsuddin Jamar, 42, a U.S. citizen from Texas, drove his rented truck into the crowded Bourbon Street area around 3 o'clock on New Year's Day morning. As I said, at least 15 killed. We do know, because he had an ISIS flag in the vehicle, he also had other bombs in the vehicle. He emerged from the vehicle, guns blazing, but he was shot dead by police in that area. So much to be learned. He is an Army veteran, but his duties in the Army would not lead you to believe that he earned his knowledge of bombs while in the military. He was in human resources. He was in IT there. So it's not clear when he was radicalized. But, of course, now they're looking at various social media posts, and they're starting to see, according to President Joe Biden, what he had to say last night is that there were indications on social media hours before the carnage, certainly that he was going to carry out. The other news this morning is what we're learning about the explosion of that Tesla outside a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. Authorities now believe that was an act of terrorism as well, because there were bombs inside of that vehicle. The driver is dead. No other people were at least seriously injured in that incident. What is interesting is that the driver of the truck in New Orleans and the driver of that Tesla in Las Vegas rented that vehicle from an online app that's used called Turo, T-U-R-O. Now, there's no indication that Turo is involved with any of this, but they are saying, authorities are saying it's kind of interesting that these two men used that app. So a lot of investigation has to occur. Right now, the Sugar Bowl game between Georgia and Notre Dame was canceled yesterday. They are still planning to play that game today, as far as we know. But as we heard in the first segment of our program this morning, the Attorney General of Louisiana, Liz Murrill, has some concerns about that, because that means a lot of people are still there in the midst of this investigation of this terrorist attack that occurred early on New Year's Day morning. But as far as we know right now, the Sugar Bowl is due to go ahead. So this is the way we're starting our year here, folks. And, we look at these things, and Tom Homan was interviewed on, he is President-elect Trump's border czar, and he was saying, there's no indication that these two men in these incidents came across the border, but he says we're living in dangerous times. Tom Homan says we're living in dangerous times because of Joe Biden's frivolous and cavalier attitude towards our border security. He mentioned in particular, Tom Homan did, that during the first Trump administration, there were 11 people encountered on our southern border who were on the terrorist list. During Joe Biden's time, 388 on the terrorist list have been detected. And as Tom Homan notes, we know there are thousands of gotaways. And so we're living in very dangerous times. And the hope is that the FBI is going to work harder, perhaps some people would say, to track this down. Because if these people can do what they did in the last 24 hours, both in New Orleans and Las Vegas, perhaps there are others out there as well. All right, joining me in studio right now is AFR News reporter Chris Woodward. Chris, this year promises to be another busy year. There were some victories and some losses in 2024 legally for Christians. There's also a movement inside the business community, which you also cover.
Yes.
Of trying to diminish diversity, equity, and inclusion, better known as DEI policies.
Yes.
So let's start first with legal battles. What happened in 24, some highlights, and what are you seeing for 25?
Well, one that happened in 24 and will continue into 25 is a case allowing a case of Connecticut female athletes to continue. This is one that actually goes back about 5 years. This February is going to mark 5 years that 4 female track athletes in the state of Connecticut went to court saying it was unfair that the State Athletic Association made them compete against males. Connecticut is one of the states, one of the first states to really move in that direction. And Selena Soleil, Ashley Mitchell, some other ladies went to court with the help of Alliance Defending Freedom saying this is a violation of our Title IX rights. It's unfair for us to have to compete against these males. They are dominating us in various sporting events. We're losing ribbons, we're losing tournaments, we're losing scholarship opportunities. Now, I said this is 5 years. All of these young ladies have graduated high school at this point, but recently federal courts have said they still have an argument to make in court, even though they are no longer in high school competing against males. So they are going into court this year, and this is the closest case to the U.S. Supreme Court in terms of males and female sports. It's not at the Supreme Court. It's at the federal level. It'll be at the second appeals court level probably by the end of the year. But it's definitely one to watch, even though it's in Connecticut, because decisions here will impact decisions in court opinions where you live.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the whole transgender issue, whether it is men competing in girls sports or men using, ladies' restrooms and change rooms, I think it had an impact on the election, because even those who would describe themselves as politically liberal, they have daughters.
Yes. That
they want to protect from this absolute insanity that Joe Biden has allowed.
Yes. I mean, it goes to show you how far politics and political parties have gone. I mean, Democrats are the reason why we have Title IX. They kind of saw a direction, the women's movement there in the early 70s, and really got behind the idea of creating a fair place, a fair space for women in schools. And that's why you have women's locker rooms. That's why you have women's basketball teams, all these kinds of things. And now you have Democrats, including Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, saying, it's about inclusivity. These men say they're women, so why not treat them as women as well? Which goes to show you how far the party has moved in the last 50 years, where you're a woman, people should hear you out and give you equal opportunity to, we don't care about you anymore.
Now, and the downside of all of this is a law coming in California,
yes,
which basically says parents do not have to be notified if their little Johnny comes to the human resources department at a school and saying, I feel like a girl. So it's a parental non-notification law coming into effect in California.
Yeah, and this is a first nationally, but as you say, California will start enforcing a law prohibiting school districts from adopting policies that require staff to notify parents if their children change their gender identification. The law was a priority for Democratic lawmakers in California who wanted to halt such policies passed by several districts. And that's one of the issues here. These were elected school district officials. They were elected by the people. The people wanted these things. And now the state of California says, we don't care what the people in your district want and what they called on you to vote for. We know better than you. You can't do this. It's going to be in court because it's a violation of a teacher's speech rights. And certainly it's a violation of parental rights. And I say this all the time, if the Lord tarries and I'm still on this show or today's issue, some other program you and I do on American Family Radio, America, don't roll your eyes at crazy things California does, because what California starts, other states start doing. So we're talking about California right now, but I guarantee you at some point this year, you'll see this in another part of the country on the east side of the Mississippi River. Think Illinois, Massachusetts, some other liberal bastion, and maybe even in a, purple state.
Still with schools, and I know you and other reporters in the newsroom have been working on what has happened, and Mike Huckabee, in the interview we did with him, raised this concern. What we saw in the way of anti-Semitism on our campuses in this country, absolutely disgusting, in the wake of the massacre, the Hamas massacre of Israeli citizens, 1,200 men, women, and children. And within hours, you had anti-Israel protests on our campuses. We had some initial reactions, some high-profile university presidents stepped down, but we are still seeing it on those campuses.
Yes, and I think part of the reason why is because schools did not really clamp down on it early enough. Certainly, they haven't been hard enough on this because, what's happened at NYU, for example, has inspired other campus student groups or just students in other campuses to do something similar. And that's why what began in one or two little places started popping up every hour on Fox and on AFN, various news outlets that have covered these things. I will tell you, a number of our sources have said, Jewish and Christian sources have said, everybody needs to be more caring about this situation because they're not just coming for the Jewish students or the nation of Israel. They will have no problem denouncing Christianity and various Christian leaders. So, Israel today, Western civilization that promotes Christianity tomorrow.
Yeah, and this all comes under the umbrella of wokeness that has infected this country, and it's also infected businesses. But we understand you've been doing some stories on this. that there are some large corporations in this country that at least they're telling the public they're starting to move away from those DEI policies that they've had in place.
Yeah, the biggest one is Walmart, which back in November became the latest and biggest company to roll back its DEI policies. And they didn't just say, hey, we're not going to do diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff anymore. The changes confirmed by Walmart are sweeping and include everything from not renewing a 5-year commitment for an equity racial center set up in 2020 after the police-involved death of George Floyd, to pulling out of a prominent gay rights index. And when it comes to race or gender, Walmart will no longer be giving priority treatment to suppliers. This is a huge thing because you have obviously one of the world's largest companies here. And a lot of companies, they tend to react after a competitor or a big name does something like this. So at some point this year, you'll probably start to see the list of companies moving away from DEI, because they may not say this publicly, but I guarantee you somebody in the boardroom said, well, you know, Walmart did this. It's probably safe for us to move away from DEI as well.
Do you think it's reaction to the public? I think it's connected to the election, what we saw in the election, moving away from that kind of thinking in our federal government, wokeness, DEI policies, all of those things. And some of these policies are pretty impactful upon Christians who may be in the workplace.
Yes.
You know, that you're not even allowed to express an opinion on these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why they have moved away is public sentiment. You've got a number of shareholder activist individuals and groups that have gone to shareholder meetings and, you know, raised a stink about these kinds of issues. That's kind of a new trend. It's not just, well, we're going to stop shopping there. There's nothing wrong with that. But in addition to that, a number of groups, including even American Family Association now, they go to shareholder meetings to raise issues and shareholder resolutions to bring this to the attention of shareholders, many of which have no idea the company is even doing this. And shareholder activists have long argued that DEI policies, like the one Walmart had, are a negative. They cause shareholders to lose money because people do stop shopping there after they realize this company, Walmart or some other one, is just doing gobbledygook. Another reason I think companies have moved away from this is because even lawyers have been able to kind of persuade the CEO or CFO, COO, CO something that, look, it's illegal what we're doing here. We're fighting racism with anti-racism, and that's just as wrong as racism.
Yeah.
So I think it's a number of factors, but definitely public sentiment is the driving one.
Yeah, and I think it's encouraging parents. What's been going on in school districts across the country, I think, has prompted parents to get more involved and to pay attention to policies. I think it started several years ago in Virginia, when a school district was allowing a guy to go in and use girls' bathrooms and all that sort of thing. We saw parents getting activated there. It's been happening in certain areas of California where parents are getting out there and saying enough is enough of all of this. And, it's going to take that kind of uprising, peaceful protest, if you want to describe it that way, for school districts to say, maybe we better rethink this like corporations are.
Yes, I would strongly advise any, mama bear out there or just a parental rights advocate to really stay engaged. If you're not already engaged, find ways on how to get engaged and stay in the fight. Don't let a holiday period or optimism about the Trump administration returning and, quote, fixing everything delay or deter you from doing something for your community. You should care what's going on in schools, even if you don't have students in schools, because today's students are tomorrow's mayors and elected officials. So you really do need to stay involved in the fight.
And there are lots of good Christian legal organizations that are there to help you in these battles. Alliance Defending Freedom, Liberty Counsel,
Pacific Justice Institute,
all of those.
A number of them.
All right, and we're here to tell you all about it.
Yes.
Here at American Family Radio. Thank you, Chris Woodward. We really appreciate it. Hey, listen, we got to get out of here, make room for much more great programming here at American Family Radio. We'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.